Thank you for joining us today, and a good afternoon to everyone. We are pleased to have you with us, and our humble apologies for the delayed start owing to some technical difficulties. I am Anton Thailand, the voice of the webinar and the Chief Evangelist for Luminary Learning Solutions. Welcome to Revive and Grow, not just another webinar, a part of the formula that contributes to the unique Saturdays are for Learning with Luminary, with segments and topics that will unfold till August. So gear up and get your learning on. Today's segment of Revive and Grow, we're looking at managing effective meetings, a conversational exchange of experiences to grasp best practices, alter perceptions, and make points to implement. Facilitating the conversation this afternoon is Gihan Malshan, a trainer with Luminary Learning Solutions. And joining us today are our subject matter experts. It's my pleasure to welcome our guest this afternoon, Janisha Wimalaratna, Manager, Learning and Development for London Stock Exchange Group. And joining her is Mangala Durwinka, who is Head of Human Resources and for Mobitel Private Limited. So over to them now for what promises to be an hour of riveting conversations. Gihan, over to you, please.
Thank you, Anton. Good afternoon, Janisha. Good afternoon, Mangala. Pleasure to have you both. So good afternoon, everyone who's joining in for the webinar today. Topic today is managing effective meetings. So this is something we do on everyday basis and then integral part of our work life when it's come to completing tasks and then dealing with people. So to start off the conversation, I would like to turn to Janisha and then to start, I mean, do we really need to have meetings in our workplace, or can it be done without meetings?
It looks like I seem to have a reputation for being a stickler at meetings. Vidusha seems to think so. Hence I seem to be here today, but very happy to be here. Thank you. And I think being a stickler for meetings, I suppose I could say, I think, where more than two people need to really talk about something, it becomes a meeting. So I do know that, in many occasions we should be looking at alternative ways, but there are definitely certain occasions where you have to come together. It's a way to engage. It's a way to share ideas, make sure a larger group of people, have a say in something. So that interaction creates a lot of, sociable opportunities for the organization as well.
Yeah, just to add on to what Janisha said, I agree that you need to meet up and discuss if you have two or more people. At the same time, there are maybe, as you rightly said, there are alternative means of managing the same task than meeting together. Like for an example, if you need to get an update of a particular task, you can easily share the formats or templates and ask your participants to update the statuses in the templates so that you will have a documented a piece of paper at the end of the whole communication. So that will kind of save time of the participants, and if necessary only you can get the participants for a formal discussion in setting up the whole context in a particular framework. So I believe, yeah, you have to decide whether you need to call a meeting or whether you can manage with alternative means in delivering the same output at the end of the day. Yeah.
Thanks, thank you, Mangala. Like how you have highlighted, there are so many ways of sharing information, and then we need to decide whether meeting is the most suitable or the efficient way to communicate or share that information, because like you said, there are so many formats that we use work life of organization to share information, which can be shared through an email. And just like you said, meeting is a integral part, and it is important to have meetings, but we need to carefully select, I mean, to what topics that we need to call in a meeting for. So again, this is my next question or this topic of this today's webinar. Mangala, I'm turning towards you on this question. How do you call or how do you differentiate between effective meeting, or how do you say whether the meeting was effective?
Yeah, so let me bring in some background that I used to come from. Like, I was initially from manufacturing, from apparel sector, and started off my career from process engineering. So let me put this particular meeting, effective meetings, managing effective meetings, into a process perspective. You'll have a input, you'll have a process in place, and then you'll have an output. So when you set the input, you set targets, and you will have an objective ultimately to have a product out. So so it's important for you to have that process and ensure that you see whether you have got the right output right first time. So I would say if you have achieved your output effectively, and your objectives have been met, which was set at the beginning, then I think you have effectively managed your time and the participants' time. Janisha can add on to that.
Sure. So I think for me, two things. Definitely one, as Mangala said, having an outcome, actionable point, something you can actually work towards. And for me, the other aspect of it is really asking the participants themselves. I think output is one thing, but if the participants don't feel that there has been an actual achievement out of the meeting, sometimes even though you feel there's an output, it could be a discrepancy there. So always try to get feedback, I would say.
Yeah, it's true.
Thank you. I think the key part there is, or the key point there is, meeting is a two-way thing, and then you need to get participants' output to measure whether the meeting was effective. Because from as the organizer or the moderator, you can be satisfied from your end, thinking that okay, you have communicated the information that you had to communicate, and then you have asked for a timeline which everyone agreed, but it may not be effective because from a participant point of view, it may not be the most efficient solution that they were looking forward to. So, okay, this actually leads to my next question or the statement, rather, because all of this is common sense. I would again turn towards you, Mangala, first on this. All of this is common sense, and then even from childhood, I mean, we have been having meetings. I mean, it may not be work-related meetings, but there are certain forums, even schools, I mean, even tuition classes, or there are meetings. It could be informal, but there are meetings. We have been having meetings, and then even from the first day we join an organization, we have been participating in meetings. So most of this is common sense, but people don't seem to do those things properly. I mean, why is it that we don't follow through on these, and then why is it that we have to talk about these and then we don't do these effectively?
I think, as you rightly said, day in, day out, from from smaller days today, we all have meetings. We believe that the meetings are run, effortlessly, and we all know how to manage, meetings. We believe that, as a participant or as a chair, we believe that we have the right skills in managing the meetings. But like, if you take a minute and see, like, will you invest time or money in learning managing meetings? You might not sometimes. Like, will you at least put some effort in googling or going into YouTube and some watch some videos in managing effective meetings? We might not. But if you need to learn 5G or any other technology, if you really want to, but you'll do a Google search and find it, or even you might put your effort in going for a class and study the subject. But we take this managing meetings effectively as granted, and we don't put much effort in upskilling ourselves in managing meetings. So I think, in a nutshell, I think we've taken it for granted, although it's common sense. that the meetings can be managed effortlessly. But there are certain protocols, certain principles, certain rules that you need to kind of look at when you have an effective meeting. So those are the things that we should learn. I think we shouldn't take it for granted.
Thanks, Mangala. I think you raised a very valid point, and I would say an eye-opener, because we know meeting is common sense, but we take it for granted, and then we don't see managing meetings as a skill that you need to invest on, or you need to learn, or you need to master. I think that is something which we need to be mindful about, and then because for you to get effective results at the end of a meeting, you need to have or you need to manage the meeting effectively. So this leads to my next section, or I would like to talk about planning about meetings, because end of the day, for you need to have a meeting effectively, you need to be able to plan it properly so that you handle that meeting effectively, and then the outcomes will be met. Janisha, I'm turning towards you on this. So in terms of planning, I would think one of the key criteria is how you select participants. So what sort of criteria should we look at, or what sort of selection that we need to consider when selecting participants?
Yeah, this I think I learned a while back from one of the leaders in a company I used to work for. He would ask, for who would you cancel the meeting? If that person or people are absolutely needed for that meeting, and if they're not coming, you have to cancel it. They need to be in the meeting. So what that probably kind of something I used to really think for myself when I would actually set up the meetings. Apart from that, I think you have to think who can actually yield results, who needs to be participating in the meeting that can actually bring about a certain outcome that you're hoping for, and who would be directly impacted by being a participant in that meeting. So we have various reasons why people join, and sometimes we even have people just coming in to observe as a development need or for their growth, and those participants are also important. So I think it really depends on the purpose of the meeting. So as a meeting leader or someone senior, you need to be really thinking about some of these aspects before you set up that meeting.
Yeah, just to add on to what Janisha said, I think inclusive of all that, I sometimes believe the topic of the discussion is also matters a lot. Sometimes if it is confidential, you need to be mindful of the participants that you are going to call in. So the appropriate participants will have to be called in for that particular conversation, so that the confidentiality can be maintained. So it's very important, and also at the same time, the number of participants, the limitation will also play an important role in selecting your the participants list. One other thing that in practice that I have observed in many times in many organizations is that, like, the boss comes into the meeting, and he basically gets another supporting party behind him, not as an observer or a learning intervention, but to ensure that he gets the information pumped into the boss. So I mean, sometimes it's highly non-value adding resource, whereas the person could have done a better job. So I think as participants, the participants will have to play a key role in equipping themselves with the relevant information prior to the meeting, and ensuring the right participants at the right time for the meeting is very important. So those are little additions to what Janisha said.
Thanks, Mangala. Thanks, Janisha. I think both of you raised a very valid point. I mean, in terms of selecting participants, we need to look at the content of the meeting or the purpose of the meeting, and then what sort of a value addition that our participants will bring in. And then, like Mangala said, I mean, there are certain nitty-gritties that you need to consider, especially given organizational politics. I mean, bosses will bring in certain people so that they actually feed in information. Again, in your opinion or with your experience, Mangala, what sort of number of people that would you call in as an ideal kind of number of people to have in a meeting? I understand this varies based on the meeting content and the topic.
Yeah. Yeah, so absolutely right. You know, it varies with the topic and the content that you want to cover. As Janisha said, sometimes you might bring in participants as observers for their learning purposes. But typically, the smaller the group, effective the output, I would personally feel. Hence, I would say 7 to 8 or maximum 10 people would contribute a shorter meeting, and it'll be easier for the participants to contribute, and the meeting can be structured in a proper manner. But it, as you rightly said, it varies with the expectation or the purpose of the meeting. You shouldn't go with quite a big number as well, so that it will dilute. So the purpose of a meeting has to be looked at very seriously before you look at the numbers.
Great, great. So, uh, uh, in terms of participants, and then the next important consideration would be how long you're going to have the meeting. Because again, this I understand this varies based on the content of the meeting or the topic of the meeting, but if it is a meeting that you need to basically arrive on certain decisions, uh, what would be ideal duration? Will it be half an hour? Will it be 1 hour? Or will it be 15 minutes sufficient in terms of
In terms
duration of the
of
meeting?
yeah, if I'm to answer that question, Gihan, I would say, as you rightly said, it depends on the topic that you're going to address and the amount of information that you have to kind of convey, and the points that you have to have a dialogue on. But average time span for a particular person to be focused and be contributing to a particular topic, I would say it's half an hour to 45 minutes max. But it depends on your interest on the topic as well. So you have to be a little bit mindful of the choice of your medium. Let's say, for an example, if you're having an online meeting, you have to think of the duration very carefully. If you have a online meeting for a long time, people will go on mute and basically shut off their video and they start doing their own work. They will not contribute properly. So the mode of meeting is also important in terms of deciding on your the duration, and at the same time the facts that you are going to cover and the discussion points that you are going to discuss during the session is important. I would say a meeting should within an hour, so that it will be effective and people will talk to the point, and it can be administered quite nicely than a long hours meeting. But certainly there may be situations where you'll have to have long duration meetings, but you'll have to have breaks in between so that you can have a proper continuation from one section to the other. Yeah, that's what I would feel.
Thanks, Mangala. I think during sharing thoughts, you raise a very valid point about online meetings or the medium. Now with this COVID situation, most of us are working from home, or certain meetings are happening online. So that is a valid consideration that people need to bear in mind in terms of having meetings, because interactions wouldn't be physical or face to face, but it would be rather online. And then ensuring that your participants are engaged is a key concern in terms of having a meeting effectively. So next, I would like to turn to Janisha. Content is important and the number of people, participants are important, but you need to have an agenda for a meeting, and then people need to know why they're coming in for a meeting. But there are so many meetings that you get called in. Sometimes even the meeting topic or the heading is also not revealing about the discussion that's going to be taken place, and then you don't know why you are going in for a meeting until kind of you sit there for about half an hour, and then realize either you're not needed for that meeting, it's a waste of your time, or probably you're not equipped to basically participate or provide the necessary inputs during that meeting. So how important is it to have a Janisha, and then what sort of practices should we kind of follow in terms of preparing an agenda and then sharing it?
Gihan, was that for me? I just missed you.
Yes, yes. The question was how important is it to have an agenda for a meeting, and then what sort of practices do we need to follow in terms of sharing it, in terms of keeping people informed prior to the meeting?
Yeah, so actually, again, I need to really refer back to, one of our, I suppose they're all teachers in some ways, someone who was a leader, and whenever I would send a meeting request, even if there was a proper topic, a subject heading, and some points, he would always call me and ask me what's the purpose, who else is in the meeting, what are you hoping to gain out of it? And I would find that really annoying in the beginning, and then when I would actually sit in for those meetings with him, I would really figure out that this is actually very helpful, because he was well prepared. He knew what the other people would also or may come up with, and he was so well prepared that the meeting would actually go off quite well, and we would actually have an outcome out of it. So I think to that level, that kind of preparation is really helpful, and I do believe in the whole preparation mantra out of the experience, I think. And I have to say, sometimes I do go a little, haywire sometimes, in terms of not really being prepared. I do that, but I face the consequences as a result. So that preparation in terms of having an agenda, especially I think during this time, what we are facing at the moment, sending across any relevant data, material, documents well ahead of time, at least 24 hours ahead of time, I would say, so that people can really read through, understand, and come prepared. And it's more about decision making and sharing ideas rather than just kind of going through the presentation or, kind of going through the material. So I recently found out that the LinkedIn CEO, I think Weiner, he has completely eliminated presentations from his, repertoire and the way they work. So it looks like it's working for them. They also actually share everything 24 hours ahead of time. And voila, the meetings seem to be going on quite well. So I think in that sense, having that material go out 24 hours before, making sure everyone's aware of the purpose of the meeting, and even at the start of the meeting, ensuring making sure that kind of people are aware of what the outcome is going to be about.
Okay, thanks, Janisha. I think it actually really helps, because one of my previous employers, the organization which I work for, we had this practice of on the meeting invite, you're supposed to say what the meeting is about, and then what sort of input is required from your participants, and then at the end of the day, what's the decision that you're going to take. So is it about making decisions, or is it about just sharing information? And then, like you said, the content needs to be circulated at least 24 hours prior, so that the meeting is effective, and the meeting starts on time and then finishes on time. I think you can schedule meetings, but if the content or the agenda or the purpose of the meeting is not shared, you cannot expect participants to provide their 100% or the meeting to be effective, because participants will not be ready to contribute. Um, uh, uh, So this again leads to another discussion, or in terms of conducting meetings or having meetings, because you can be prepared to have a meeting very effectively, but in terms of conducting it, that's where it really matters. So sometimes people go overboard in terms of timing. Sometimes people don't start on time. Sometimes people wait for about 10-15 minutes for others to turn up. So, Mangala, I'm turning towards to you on this. In terms of conducting a meeting effectively, what sort of practices would help in your experience? What sort of roles people could play in terms of conducting a meeting effectively?
Yeah, I think it's a very valid question. As going back to the previous question you asked, it's a common sense, and do we really practice it though? I think these are the tools that we really need to practice, where you need to have a facilitator, or rather a chair, who would basically run the meeting and would take the entire participants through, and also there has to be it can be the facilitator himself, or a person who can help him out with the timing, right, in terms of a particular topic to be discussed, and taking care of the time management part of the whole discussion. And also either participants themselves, or like it will be better if we can have a secretary or a person who would take down notes. And if it is an online meeting, the meeting recording can be kept. So basically, those are, I would say, the main parts of the stakeholders of a meeting. But not forgotten, the participants itself plays a key role as well. So I would say mainly a facilitator or a leader, secretary, and a timekeeper makes a good team in terms of contributing to the whole framework of managing the meeting effectively. Although we sometimes take it for granted that the timekeeper's role, he or she has to play a vital role in managing the content, because he's the person who will guide the chairperson in ensuring the entire planned tasks or the discussion points are taken through. So he plays a key role. At the same time, you can't underestimate the challenge that a secretary would go through, because there'll be quite a lot of people talking, and sometimes there'll be agreements and disagreements during a meeting. And one funny thing that I have most frequently has seen is that secretary herself or himself jot down the final act or the decision as she would have felt it. Sometimes she won't come out with the final decision. We talk a lot, but she had understood, or he had understood something totally different, and the action point is kind of drafted on the minute. When you get the minute only, you feel like, no, this is not what we finally agreed. So I think as the facilitator and the participants, it's a joint responsibility to ensure that you facilitate the other people's role in the whole communication channel, ensure the final outcome is properly documented and actioned accordingly. So those are the key roles I can kind of think of, Anton. Sorry, Gyan.
Thanks, Mangala. I think I actually uh, I remember one of my bosses who used to kind of have a designated minute taker. And after the meeting is over, the last 5 minutes, what he does is he asks the minute taker to basically read out all the minutes that he has taken, and then especially the action points, so that people will have to agree, so that there is no kind of dissonance in terms of, okay, what was discussed was not kind of properly documented. And then minutes could be circulated about 1 or 2 days later or sometime later, but everyone knows these were the minutes which were taken, and then everyone give their kind of consent to the minutes and the actions. So I
Also,
think one thing that we
Gyan,
could do it. Yeah,
sorry,
please
yeah,
go ahead.
yeah, just one more thing. I think in terms of putting the action item right, most of the time what we forget is the deadline to respond. There again, the secretary takes the sole discretion of putting whatever she or he feels the right time for that particular task. But I think the practice that you said, reiterating, or rather going through the minutes and action dates is quite will help the participants to comply with.
True. I think that really helps. Uh, so, Janisha, if you have anything to add in terms of your experience, also basically roles which are played during a meeting, and then uh, how someone should manage a meeting effectively.
Yeah, just to Mangala's point, I do a little bit of a cheeky thing as well, and I hope no one from my organization is here now. But especially kind of critical meetings, even after you actually share, and then you kind of even at the meeting you ask, okay, now what are the points? What do we have to do? Sharing it on an email afterwards also really helps, and then even saying please respond if there's anything to add and if there's any further clarification, after which we will continue. So something like that, little cheeky, but kind of hoping that point will come across on the seriousness of the meeting. So that's a little bit cheeky. Yeah, but I think Mangala covered most of what I would also think of. Yeah.
Thanks, Janisha. I think even though it is a bit cheeky, I think it helps in the long run because the clarity is there. So that you are not expecting someone to think like the way you do, but you're putting it across and then saying, okay, this is my understanding. What do you really think about it? And then please get back if this is not the same understanding that you have, so that you become task oriented, and then the task would happen. And then I would say later on, the conflicts will also be lesser because the understanding is the same. So with this, I would open up this question to both of you in terms of do's and don'ts, key things. Again, I would ask you to share your experiences as well in terms of managing meetings effectively. Other than what we have talked about, what are the key things? Because sometimes you are being called in as a participant to a meeting. I mean, there's a way that you need to behave or add value as a participant versus a moderator. Sometimes you are being called in for meetings as a person who need to take decisions. So then how you need to add value is different. And then sometimes, like Janisha mentioned earlier, we bring in people or as a part of their learning and development so that they observe and learn. So I would open the forum to both of you, probably to Mangala first, in terms of do's and don'ts or key tips that you can share.
Okay, let me take the negatives first. I would say, um, if, as I previously said, don't want people coming together, and there's no need of a discussion per se. But if you can handle it in a different manner, right? Like I said, by circulating a particular template or a format in terms of gathering information as updates, so that will be quite helpful. And also, like we previously said, don't invite participants who are not really necessary to be there at the meeting. And also, I would say, don't close a meeting without proper closure, right? Sometimes you keep it open, you don't know whether we came to a consensus or whether we have kind of agreed or disagreed on the points or the agenda points that we have had. So it's very important for us to close the meeting so that all the participants would understand, okay, this is what it is and this is what we discussed at the end of the whole session, so that in perception, everybody feels that meetings are a time waste. So people would want to avoid meetings. So in order to make it more productive tool in day-to-day operations, you need to make sure that people understand that they're contributing in a meeting. I think in terms of do's, there are a lot of do's that you have to, like what we discussed previously, also have an agenda, ensure that you plan yourself, get yourself prepared, even running the entire discussion on a proper manner, keeping time, taking the notes, ensuring the visual aids are prepared well in advance, and those are very clear for everyone. So those are some of the do's I would say that you should follow strictly, and so that inviting the right the participants. Those are the points that I can kind of come to my head at the moment.
Thanks, Mangala. Janisha, if you have anything to add.
Yeah, and I think if you're a meeting planner or you're the lead, you will see quite a few different roles, as we spoke of earlier, a lot of different characters, different people who play different roles in the meeting. So you'll have those people who sometimes will just, have their own little meetings, those pocket meetings, and they might not be really engaged. So you need to be able to, bring them back. In the politest, nicest way you can. You see the kind of, sometimes you see information hoarders, who will just kind of have the information, but they're not sharing, but that they can do, they can benefit. The meeting will benefit from their sharing, and you get the shy people who are, probably they have some ideas, but they're not really sharing. So how do you draw them in, get them to open up, make them feel comfortable in the meeting, make sure it's a safe environment. And if you're a participant yourself, I think being very conscious that you can benefit no matter, no idea is a bad idea. So please do make sure that you always contribute. I know, especially in our culture, sometimes you feel, let's not really talk too much, or let's you can feel a little shy or nervous, but I think if you feel comfortable and if you're there for a reason, so I'm sure you could contribute, so please do contribute, and make sure you're super focused, don't have those kind of ulterior motives and different agendas, because it's not going to benefit the organization, it's not going to benefit you. So that, I think, apart from even what Mangala said, absolutely I agree with him, and just a few more things, I think.
Anton, we can't hear you.
Thanks, Janisha. Thanks, Mangala. This question, again, I'm opening up to both of you. Again, this is about looking at or sharing your views or thought. But first, I would turn to Janisha, because like we discussed, there are so many things that you need to do and then that you can do. But ultimately, even in meetings, as in organizations, everything is down to kind of power hierarchy, and then the politics play which is in there, because beginning of the discussion we discuss about there are certain bosses or certain superiors who bring in someone else with them for the meeting just because they want that information to be fed to them at a later point in time. So how do you overcome that, and then how do you ensure that everyone participates and then the necessary people are in meetings, because sometimes you will have to basically heed into this power and politics, because end of the day you need to get your task done uh, in the most efficient manner. So how do you manage that, because I think this would be a critical aspect in terms of managing meetings effectively. So Janisha, I would first turn to you, then I would like to hear Mangala's thoughts as well.
Yeah, and I think we all live and breathe this kind of situation, and I don't think it's only any one organization. All organizations have this kind of situation. I think in a lot of ways, the meeting organizer or the lead possibly would need to call it out, and I think kind of making sure that at least you go around the table, get everyone's input, make sure, and especially now we are even more challenged because most of our meetings are on calls. And even when it's a webinar, a lot of people don't put on their video, so you don't really see that engagement, you don't, see the body language. So kind of making sure that we call out. So if I'm the lead, I would say, I would know who the participants, I would even call out by name, making sure that they are all giving their input. And if it's really kind of, I know it's not easy. It's easy for me to say this, but it's always difficult when those small things are happening and you know it, but there's maybe not much you can do about it. But I think it kind of boils down to the organization culture. So if it's a continuous thing that is really impeding the progress and this success of even that meeting, I think it needs to be really kind of brought out, and maybe you can gain the support of your leadership and even HR, just to kind of see if there's anything that could be done to manage it more effectively, because sometimes there's really nothing much you can do as an individual, and it's a bigger picture, a bigger kind of a problem to solve. But I think if you're leading it, something needs to be done. You need to call it out, at least by making sure that you engage with each and every person there.
I think, Janisha covered the most of it. There's very little that I have to add on there. We all know it's very important that we understand all these politics are available all over. Let it be even in home front, you have little bit of politics being played, right? So you need to manage it, and I think like what we discussed, it's the meeting facilitators. Responsibility to ensure that all the participants are given the right prominence and the maximum taken out of the participants. Otherwise, you are not respecting for their commitment and time. So, as like Janisha said, it boils down to the company culture, and we need to respect each other. If you're calling in, staff or the people for meetings, and it's a fine line. You need to ensure that you need to manage politics quite well, respecting each other. But at the same time, sometimes authority will have to be imposed also in certain circumstances, because at the end of the day, let me give you a classic example. Let's say these days, if we have quite a lot of meetings in terms of taking decisions in terms of BCP activities when certain news goes around. So at the end of the day, there has to be one decision maker in terms of taking the things forward. So given the circumstances, authority and power also has to be executed over the others, because one party will have to take a call and move forward in terms of executing the decision. So I don't say politics or rather the authority is a negative input for a meeting, but that has to be rightly used in the right direction. So culture plays a major role. You can't kind of eliminate everything in overnight, but gradually you have to bring a good culture, values, and respect for each other. Yeah, that's I think Janisha covered majority.
Yeah, thanks, Mangala. I think if I were to sum up what both of you said, because culture plays a huge role, and then politics are a kind of given thing, which, because end of the day, all of us are political animals, whether it's office or whether it's home front. So you need to understand the powers that are in play, and then you need to ensure, as the facilitator, you get the maximum out of your meeting. Because I once had a boss. We used to have our monthly meetings, and then we used to call in stakeholders from other departments as and when required, when they are kind of, if there are certain action items which are pending. But if he kind of sees that, because all these other stakeholders coming from other departments are kind of heads of departments, so if he sees that things are not getting done, he would have a kind of occasional meeting with CEO, or he would rather invite CEO to this meeting probably once a quarter, and then he would let everyone knows that CEO is coming for this meeting, so that everyone will be present, and then CEO will get into the point, because end of the day, he would want things done. So the excuses that comes up, and then the timelines that they give become very firm. Excuses become more or less zero, because now they feel accountable, so that he plays to the power and the politics of the organization which are in play. I think it's a unique combination or situation, and then every organization has its unique culture. Even though we basically broadly say there are so many types of cultures, but I would say every organization has its unique culture, and then ultimately it boils down to what kind of a leader that you have, and then the leadership that your organization has. So you need to find that kind of sweet spot in terms of playing to it, and then managing your meeting effectively. This again leads to my next question about end of the day, leadership drives the organizational culture, because given that both of you are in the field of people management. First, I will turn to Mangala, and then I would come to Janisha for your views. How do we ensure that when people are promoted or when people are trained for leadership positions, that the proper culture is maintained, or at least because the current leadership may not have certain discipline in terms of managing meetings, because for example, if your boss or the CEO is always late for meetings, no one would come in for meetings on time because everyone expect the meeting to happen or start later. But if your CEO is on time, everyone would turn up to the meetings at least 5 minutes prior, because that's the culture which is kind of driven by the leadership. A simple example. So how do you ensure that leaders who are basically we are grooming would stick to right practice?
Are you referring to the point of having meetings or as a general culture change?
Having meetings, because general culture change
Okay.
would be a very diverse thing to talk about. So in
Yeah,
terms of simple
yeah.
things of having meetings, managing meetings effectively.
To be very frank with you, in terms of changing sometimes the top leadership is going to be really challenging, though, right? As you rightly said previously, the culture boils down from the top to the rest of the whole organization.
Yes.
But I think the person who chairs the meeting will have to set the discipline. But at the same time, going back to the previous question you asked in terms of the authority or the power that the people are having, especially the participants. If the meeting chair is a junior person, sometimes you will have to suffer until all the people are kind of present on the meeting to start the meeting. But I think it's the personal values that we have to talk about on a day-to-day basis, respecting each other. I think we need to respect each other's time. Let it be a junior or a senior personality within the organization. Everybody has a value for their time. So we need to respect, and we need to basically support in terms of, if you have accepted the meeting, I think there's no excuse that you have in place to say that you are getting late. But at the same time, you can always keep the meeting organizer informed in advance if you're getting late, so that he can start the meeting if it is possible without you, and then you can be kind of briefed about the points that was kind of would have been missed out. uh, what we have personally seen, especially nowadays with the online meeting, is that people take it for granted, where they log in whenever they feel like logging in, not respecting the time, right? At least not giving a call to the meeting organizer, because the organizer will have to fish people by calling before the meeting starts and see whether are you logging in. All of us are waiting, right? But if it is a physical meeting, that is much better. But when you're working from home, sometimes people tends to finish their dog's vaccine, or taking care of the kids class, online class, and then come back to the session. So you have to have a discipline in kind of responding to your meeting times. The leadership plays a role. So I think even the meeting chair plays a leadership at that particular given point of time. So you need to ensure that you respect the meeting chair, irrespective of his position in the organization, and be there and contribute. I think that's what I feel. Janisha, you can add on to that.
Yeah. Thanks, Mangala. Janisha, if you have anything to add with your experience.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think absolutely, Mangal. It's the number one thing here is values, and all organizations will have in some way communicated certain values or the values of the organization, and many organizations will have integrity as part of their values, and this really boils down to that, making sure that you respect each other, and in terms of even leadership. So because I'm in the development field, I think a lot of the training that we also do, especially for line managers and people who are coming up in the organization, taking up leadership positions, we do make it a part of, their kind of development actions or development even initiatives or interventions, not maybe specifically aimed at meetings per se, but, kind of that respect side of things, and hopefully that translates into meetings as well. And I think even having a recognition scheme that really promotes these kind of good practices, best practices and good behavior could be brought in to really support if that's needed in the organization. And all of this coming together is what's going to possibly help you, because meetings could be just one angle or one aspect if the organization is going through, this kind of difficulty. Meetings is only one way that you will see it coming through if people are not respecting each other and not, well, punctuality is a bit of a Sri Lankan thing, unfortunately. So I think we are all guilty of it at some point. But I think even in some organizations, I've seen that you have a place where you will be fined, or, if you come late, you'll be fined. I've not seen it being sustained, unfortunately, although a lot of people do, I know, have started. But I think it just boils down to your values and again, the culture. So just kind of making sure that you fix that before you try to just fix that one element of a meeting.
Sure. Thanks, Janisha and Mangala. So I think the key point is managing meetings is one aspect what you're looking at in terms of changing leadership, or in terms of grooming or having people groomed for leadership positions, because this is only one aspect, so that all the other aspects or the leadership has to be looked at from a broader perspective, so that this will also be taken care of. Janisha, you mentioned a thing about Sri Lankan thing where people get late. So again, this question, again, I'm opening up to both of you because this is about sharing your experiences, because there are so many little things that people do that actually makes a huge difference. Because one of the organizations I worked earlier, whenever meeting is scheduled, even if it is for half an hour, at least tea would be served. So that, because we as Sri Lankans, hospitality is one thing, because it's not about that you're getting a cup of tea during that meeting. Sometimes you feel obliged because you are being kind of taken care of, or basically your needs are being taken care of, so that you need to contribute to that meeting. So if meeting is arranged during lunchtime, it would be a lunch-on meeting, or evening snacks will be kind of organized. And then there was this one boss who was actually very punctual on time. He would always start meetings on time, and then people would never get late for his meeting because he was on time. And then if people do not turn up for the meeting, decisions will be made on their behalf if the meeting was not declined or the organizer has not been informed. And then the stakeholders will be made responsible, because it's their responsibility to the organizer if they are unable to come, because you need to respect everyone's time, because meetings are held for a purpose. It's not that just because the organizer felt like having a meeting, he's going to call in for a meeting and then waste everyone's time. So these are called in for a meeting. So what have you picked up along the way like this? Because these are little things that really makes a difference. And then these are things you pick up along the way, because I mean, theory doesn't teach you all these. So I would turn to Janisha first and then to Mangala.
Sorry, Gihan, I couldn't catch you. I missed you on the...
Little things that people do, for example, starting meetings on time, or basically the sharing a agenda prior, or your meeting invite says, oh, this is the purpose of the meeting, these are the decisions that needs to be taken. So in terms of examples, I mean, other than what we have discussed, if you have anything to share in terms of your experiences or with examples.
Okay, so I think the famous thing you mentioned, kind of, having snacks or lunch, or kind of making sure refreshments are available. I think this famous thing with Jeff Bezos, he says that about an earlier question I think we had, how many people should be there, that if it kind of, if two pizzas can't sustain the people, then it's too many people. And because I was reading on the LinkedIn CEO, I think he was also saying that Jeff Bezos also saying that, and if I could just steal into their meeting, I think I'm going to take a couple of their pizzas. But I think the point I'm trying to make is that it's part and parcel of our culture. I think that's sacred. And for me, I think my opinion, and Mangala may, could, I think, disagree with me. That kind of rapport formation, that little engagement, making sure our stomachs are filled, that's sacred. For me, I think I would not grudge, that kind of thing. And in some organizations, that's almost a necessity, that there should be tea, coffee, at least biscuits as a part of your meeting schedule. And it creates a little bit of and of course now it's not, you can't expect that any longer in this current situation, but it changes based on what you're really facing at the moment. But I think from an examples point of view, I had already, brought in a couple of the things where some of the leaders who've been very specific about planning it, making sure that everything is sent ahead of time, making sure that the person who's leading it starts on time, finishes on time, and that minutes are circulated later on. All those things have really helped me, I feel.
Thanks, Janisha.
I think Janisha covered most of it. One little thing that I would try to kind of pass it on is where when it comes to, we do get minutes, but whether we thoroughly go through the minutes and action those minutes well ahead of the next meeting is one thing that we all will have to be mindful. Sometimes we forget until the next meeting invite is received, right? So then you all of a sudden rush into your action items, and you sometimes fail in delivering and bringing the right output when you are being called in for the other meeting, the next meeting. So one thing is, like, you can, like Janisha said, start on time, finish it on time, and also set the next meeting date very in advance, so that you can be prepared, and ensure the secretary or the person who takes minutes to kind of have a heads up reminder well before the next meeting date, so that whoever who has missed out the email or the action items will take those things and try to execute. So all the other hospitality things are, I think it's very very important, and everybody expect at least a cup of coffee, like if you've been kind of invited soon after lunch, or like at least a green tea, so that it cuts off your oil part of your lunch. So I think it's very important that you have that. And also over the coffee also, although it might not so much of value to the meeting per se, but it engages the participants who are coming from different areas of business at that particular forum. So it's always good to have something to munch during the session and have a casual chat even soon after the meeting. Also, sometimes you might not be able to meet in person, sometimes. So one other thing that I forgot previously to tell you is, like, the etiquettes on webinar or rather online meeting is very important. Sometimes we see that, your background is not properly maintained, or rather let's say you start eating in front of other people when all the others are online, right? So I mean, we do understand that you sometimes you would have had back-to-back meetings and you would have missed your lunch, but you need to at least either excuse yourself from the other participants and you may switch off your camera if you have switched on, and have your little bit of snack, and soon whilst you're listening, and you can keep your microphone on the switch off mode. So those are little things that we can basically bring into the etiquettes of the whole meeting, because it's a new thing for all of us when it comes to online meetings. So those are little things that we can basically bring about.
Sure, sure. Thanks, Mangala. Yes, what you said is very true because now we are adjusting to this whole thing of working from home and then kind of online meetings, meeting people online, so that etiquette, I mean, you need to adjust yourself, and then that etiquette needs to be maintained. So thank you so much for all your valuable thoughts and experiences shared today. So we have come to the end of our today's webinar. So we have discussed about managing effective meetings. So we established the fact that end of the day, it's a cultural thing where how you kind of uh, have certain disciplines in place in terms of meetings, and then uh, even though meetings is kind of a thing that we are kind of exposed to from an early childhood, uh, that's a skill that you needs to master if you really want to get the best out of your meetings. So thank you so much again, Mangala and Janisha, for your valuable thoughts and then experiences shared. So I will wrap up the discussion with a quote from Harvard Business Review. So it goes on to say, sometimes 5 minutes spent with 6 people separately is more effective and productive than a half an hour meeting with them all together. So it's us to decide whether we really want to have a meeting, and then whether that meeting will be an effective meeting or a waste of everyone's time. So again, thank you both of you. Have a good evening. And then thank you everyone who has joined in for the meeting today or the webinar today. Have a good evening. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Our
Gihan.
pleasure.
Gihan. And thank you everyone for joining us this afternoon. Special thanks to Janisha and Mangala for joining us and for that wonderful knowledge share. Meetings exist with the primary objective of getting something done, as we learned today from the valuable insight, knowing why you are there, making the most of the time, minimizing interruptions, listening, agreeing to areas of responsibility, taking action, and finally documenting for reference are all vital components of productive meetings. Remember, you have the power to unleash the creative energy amongst the members or inflict the most frustrating, time-wasting experience upon them. So make a wise decision. Special thanks goes out to H1, our technology partners, for being with us throughout our series. Next week, join us again for the Revive and Grow segment, where we will cover the topic managing personal finances. Watch our social media space for more detail. Coming up in the next hour is This, That, and the Other with Varun on the exciting topical and a controversial one of that, sustainability. Is it a myth or a reality? Enjoy the rest of the day. Stay safe, stay productive.